Good morning, and welcome to our show this week with Journey with Christ. I hope everyone is continuing to do the best they can, considered everything that's going on, but we all know that every day presents a new challenge, and hopefully as we continue to move forward, we are gaining some traction. We're starting to understand some of the rules and understand some of the things that's going to be in front of us. So I just hope everyone is doing okay. I am Mark Mitchell. I'm the preaching minister at the Park Avenue Church of Christ. I am joined by my friend and colleague, Steve Fox, who's been a minister, I can still say it, almost 50 years. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Would you say I was a friend and a confidant, right?
Colleague.
Oh, a colleague, yes. Yeah, that's a good description. Well, we haven't known each other very long, but we have had a pretty tight bond together, haven't we?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
The thing that we're going through with the virus chaos, it's very, very frustrating because you've even got the medical experts and the scientific experts and political experts telling you what's going to happen and when it's going to, and nobody knows.
No.
And if the politicians were, if they were smart enough and courageous enough to stand up and say, we're taking this day by day instead of telling us what's going to happen 6 months down the road or 2 years, nobody knows. And that's what makes this situation so confusing and so filled with despair.
Well, the part that frustrates me the most is when Gloom and Doom is the menu at the dinner table every night. I mean, it seems that all we're concerned about, or all our focus is in, it's over, And we all know that's not true. Folks, just look back through history. It doesn't go that way. God is still God, and God is still ruling. He can make some moves that turns everything around. But
the way I look at this situation is the way probably we should look at every situation in our life. You either go through this problem with God, or you go through this problem without God. Those are your two choices.
It's pretty simple when you put it like that, isn't it? Yeah. And as followers of Jesus Christ, I've lived a life where I've gone without Him. That one sucks. That is...
You reading the NIV again?
Yeah, I'm reading the NIV again. That one is it's just... The world, all it has to offer is there's nothing good here.
Yeah.
And there is some truth in what they're saying, but with God, there is a new perspective and a new outlook. So yeah, you're definitely only two ways to go. I like your way better.
Thank you.
We have been discussing about the church, and you took us down this trip to, I guess, to South America, where you heard this man use this illustration and brought us along to share with us what you would put in your wagon if you were going to start a church.
Well, we ask you to think about the components that are most important. There may be some other components that we didn't touch on, but at least these four are very significant. If you took a Conestoga wagon and you took a bunch of people and you went to the Amazon River in Brazil, and when you got to this little village, the people said, what do you have in the wagon? You say, I've got a church in there. Oh, you don't have a church. No, you do. And they pull the curtain back, and inside that wagon is a Messiah and a place and a book and a table. Now there's some other things you might have to throw in there too, but those are the four basic elements of what you would need if you're going to start a church. If you don't have any of those, or don't have two of them, or don't have three of them, You don't have a church. You can call it what you want to call it, but it's not a church. So we ask you to look at those 4 things the past few weeks. And this evening we're going to suggest the 4th one. And that is, and by the way, if you want to do a little exercise on your own, if you have this much time while you're reading the Bible, go through the book of Luke and mark, or make a circle around it if you like writing in your Bible. Mark every time somebody, where Luke says at table. Jesus was at table with somebody, or the Pharisees were at table, or somebody was talking to somebody else at table. And it will probably surprise you how many times Luke uses this phrase signifying to us that this is important. You know, eating together was always important. Eating together in our society is sometimes ridiculous. So we call a meeting together to eat, so we can call another meeting so we can eat somewhere. I mean, weddings, funerals, school activities, we eat a lot together. And that has to mean something for Luke to use that phrase that many times.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Our very soul starves for what happens at a table with other people. Not counting the fact that our stomachs want some of that action too.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that the fellowship that happens around a table is like no other. Every family out there that's watching or listening would remember some of their most fondest memories around a Thanksgiving table, a Christmas table, an Easter table, a reunion table, you know, whatever it was. It probably happened around a table.
Exactly.
And the funniest stories happened around a table. When so-and-so would tell what Grandpa Jones did back, you know, those things always happen around the table. And at some point in time, they end up around the table.
Yes.
Just sitting there.
Well, Jesus got in trouble a lot of times with the Pharisees or with other religious leaders. But he got in trouble several times with his enemies because they were saying, he eats with anybody. He has no distinction when it comes to his meal fellowship, his eating fellowship. He has no distinction. He'll eat with anybody. He goes to tax collectors and harlots and people who are, you know, not in the upper echelon of society, and he eats with those people, and that's what made him mad. That's what made him very upset, because what happens when we do that is, if I ask you to come to my house for supper, I'm asking you to come and sit at my table where we are equals.
And it's also not just more than we're equals, is that anything, according to Eastern culture, anything that you do or anything that you are, I'm saying I'm okay with. If you've been married 5 times, you're saying to everyone in your little town, I'm okay with what this man has done in his life. We don't get that. And when Jesus would eat with tax collectors and you know, all the sinners, the drunks, the harlots, the whatever that may have been their story may have been, Jesus was saying to everyone in the community, we're okay with these people.
You're welcome.
You're welcome here.
Yeah.
That part of the table story we lose in translation.
Think about the fact that Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper with Judas sitting right there at the same table.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there seems to be this equality. There are a couple movies that really bring this out. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Addison
Addison
says to his black maid, "You want to come in and sit down with us?"
Yeah.
And in, that's in To Kill a Mockingbird. In It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart asks Annie, the black maid, if she would like to come in and sit down with him. Well, what does that mean for me to ask you? It means that we're on the same level playing field.
Yeah.
That you and I are equal. And, well, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Jesus was careless about his table fellowship. And I'd like to read this passage in how Luke describes it in chapter 22, beginning with verse 14. And when the hour came, he sat at table, and his apostles were with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. But I tell you, I shall not eat it again until it's fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I shall not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body. But behold, the hand of him who betrays me is with me at this table. For the Son of Man goes as it's been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to question one another which one of them it was that would do this. And then in the next paragraph, Luke tells us about there was a dispute between the apostles as to what was going on here. Not only who was going to betray him, but Jesus is connecting this with the kingdom. So who's going to be greatest in the kingdom?
Yeah.
They're arguing about that while Jesus on this probably Thursday night or Friday night is instituting this Lord's Supper and explained to them that was his body and the bread was his body and the fruit of the vine was something that represented his blood.
And his essence, his life.
His life, yeah.
Yeah, we don't get the concept of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. And you and I both know we live in a culture, we live in a world. I don't care who you are. Even you won't have unconditional love, even probably maybe in your own family. You know, there's always the probability that someone's going to says that if you do everything the way I want you to do it, I will accept you as a son, and I'll do this, or I'll accept you as a daughter if you behave in the ways that I feel is acceptable. The minute you stop, okay, that's when it ends. And Jesus sets a standard around the table that just says, I don't care who you are. You're welcome at my table.
And look at all the parents who've had to deal with drug situations with their children. You can't just throw those kids out. You can't put them on a porch and say...
Well, some parents do.
I know there's a tough love thing, but a child has to know that whatever he or she's going through, that mom and dad are going to support him. Now, I've never been in that situation, so it's real easy for me to talk like that.
Right.
But I do know some parents that have really hung in there and showed support for their kid when time after time after time that kid is, really disappointed mom and dad.
Oh, I know that I have my moments in my life and where I disappointed. And here's the thing.
But look how that's different when we surround a table.
Yes. The men at the table, when we gather at the table, that's supposed to be, okay, that was yesterday. We're in now. Mm-hmm. We don't, it's not, it shouldn't be brought up. Much like when people who come to a worship service or attend fellowship at a church or are actually part of that church. It should be just automatically understood when you're around the table that everything else is off the table. Mm-hmm. We're not going to talk about your past. We're not going to talk about how well we think you're going to do in your future.
Paul says in 1 Corinthians, when you do this, when you surround this table, you're supposed to examine yourself. I'm not supposed to be looking at Joe across the aisle or Mary over there and decide, are they worthy enough to come and sit here at the table with me and partake of communion? I've read about, I've never been in a church like this, thank goodness, but I've read about in the last part of the 1700s and the first part of the 1800s that the elders at certain churches would stand at the door, and as you came in, they would judge whether you were worthy or not, and they would give you a token. And if you had that token, you could go in and sit down and have communion. You
had to have the token to go to the table.
Yeah. And that, what kind of message is that?
Well, I have noticed that in our discussions from the story of the Messiah to the to the
Place.
place, the book, and the table. They all direct us to not look at ourselves as at the head of anything, but as we're subjected to the greater story that's going on inside these elements, these different functions. They all together say, you are welcome here.
Yes.
You're not, and of all people to be reading from that you brought up today, Luke, whose entire, seems to be his entire objective to his book, the book Luke, was to tell people there is a new sheriff in town, if you will, or a new king in town with a different set of rules than we're used to, a new kingdom. I mean, he's saying, hey, the way we're used to doing things, that's over with. There's a new thing.
Matthew wants us to see Jesus as a king. Mark wants us to see Jesus as a servant. Luke wants us to see Jesus as the Son of Man, that he was flesh, and that he had all these dealings with the people who were in the flesh around him. And so the humanity part, more than anything else, is in Luke, in the four Gospels. I was thinking a little bit as I was driving here this morning about, do you remember when you were in high school or college who you sat with when you ate? Or who you wanted to come over and sit with you when you ate?
I remember some of those.
And you know, every once in a while you could see somebody just sitting over there in the corner by themselves eating their lunch while everybody just ignored them.
Right.
And maybe that was you, and maybe that was me, you know, and maybe some of the people that came over and sat down with you, you'd rather not sit down with. But when you sit down to eat with somebody at school or in college or any place, you are sending that message of equality. And, you know, if you connect that with what's happened in this country in the past 50 years or 75 years, you know where the civil rights movement started? It didn't start in schools. It didn't start in the libraries. It didn't start in the churches. I'm almost ashamed to tell you that the university where I went to, which I love dearly and still love today, they first admitted black students to that university when the federal government came in and said, if you don't allow blacks to come in to be a part of your environment, be a part of your university, we're going to take some funds away from you. I'm ashamed to tell you that, but that's history, and that's the way it actually happened at my university. Where did that come from? Where did it didn't come from the libraries, it didn't come from the churches, it didn't come from other sources, it didn't come from politicians, it didn't come from schools. The civil rights movement began in those diners, those little diners in the South, where after a while somebody said, this is ridiculous, and we're going to change this. And it's not right that one person is welcome and another person is not welcome, so we're going to change this. That's where the civil rights movement began. And some people finally went in, sat down next to other people and said, that's what we're going to do. And that group of people went over and sat down to the next people, next position, next table, and said, this is what we're going to do. That's how it started. And it's still working like that.
Well, you know, the thing is this, and you think about it, 1900 and some odd years after Jesus established a table where everyone was welcome, we were still fighting over who was welcome at our table.
Yeah.
And we're still, and today we have a division in our world where if you and I don't agree, we can't eat at the same table.
It's other things besides race.
We've adopted other criteria, whereas acceptance is only obtainable if you see everything the way I see it. I don't know how we get past it, honestly, unless we meet Jesus at the table. That is the only way that this is ever going to stop.
Well, let me share with you a verse. I think this is one of the neatest verses in the Bible. It's Acts chapter 10 and Acts chapter 11 when Peter goes to Cornelius' house. And Peter shares that gospel with them. And there's some Gentiles who then are baptized. And then later in Acts, they have this conference in Jerusalem where they have to try to figure out what do these Gentiles have to do in order for them to become Christians. Or do they have to become Jewish? Do they have to follow Judaism? Do they have to follow Jewish laws? Or is there something else called Christianity where they just follow Jesus? So Peter comes back from Jerusalem after that little excursion. And this is what Luke writes in chapter 11. Now the apostles and the brethren who were in Judea heard that the Gentiles also had received the word of God. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcision party, that's the Jews, criticized him. Now I want you to listen to the criticism. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcision party criticized him, saying, "Why did you go to uncircumcised men and eat with them?" And Peter began and explained to them in order. I was in the city of Joppa praying, and then he explains to them the visions that he got a couple times and how that changed his mind about some things. If you'll notice, when Peter got back to Jerusalem, they didn't say, "You went up there and taught those people."
No, you ate with them.
You went up there, you went up there and baptized some of those people. You know what they were so ticked off at? You went up there and ate with those people. that was a burr under their saddle. They didn't like that at all.
No, because of what it means.
Because of what it means, you know.
That is a great point. Yeah, it wasn't the fact that these uncircumcised people now are been baptized and are God's children also. No, it was the fact that you ate with them. In fact, it seems we have that narrative storyline all the way through the epistles as it pertains to fellowship. It's the division that comes about.
The storyline when it comes to the topic of fellowship, the storyline in the four Gospels and in the epistles, over and over, different men say, "You're welcome." It started with Jesus. Well, no, I'm going to take that back. It started with John the Baptist and continue with Jesus and continue with the apostles. The storyline is we're on an equal basis.
You're welcome.
And you are welcome at the Lord's table. She's welcome, she's welcome, she's welcome, he's welcome. I can't go around in a circle and cross out the ones I want to because I'm not their judge.
No.
I'm not the one that's going to decide their eternal destiny. So when we come to that table, we have to have an attitude just like Jesus did. He eats with all those people. He has no distinction. He just eats with anybody. That should be our will as well.
It should be. And just as important, I want to keep in mind, as the description is, eating around the table, it's also just the same thing in our relationships with one another. I don't know, we should be so eager to help anybody and everybody that agreeing with us is not part of the equation. And worth, value, because the bottom line is I probably don't make it in on a value system. I'm out. Trouble is, I think everybody's out.
Well, when you pull that wagon up into that little village in Brazil along the Amazon, and you pull the curtain back or pull the cloth back, you really do have a church in there. You have a Messiah, you have a place, you have a book, and you have a table.
Mm-hmm.
No Messiah, no church. No place of security, no church. No book that tells you about that Messiah, no church. No table where you can come together and honor Jesus just as he did that night when he explained to his apostles what was going to happen to him. Those are four essential things that, whether we're in Charleston, West Virginia on Park and Main, or whether we're in Brazil somewhere, those things have to be a part of our church.
You know, we begin this with the view of the world is looking for a church, and what kind of church are they looking for? And they're looking for one that meets their needs today, which it seems to me our needs revolve around comforts, revolve around, I want a God who's going to give me all my wishes and dreams. I don't want any problems, Lord. I mean, we've sort of mandated in our lives that God has to make sure to take care of us in such a way. And it would almost seem that the churches started to follow suit. But in truth, as you've brought here, the good news of the church is that everyone's welcome. It's not it's not the what you can receive out of the relationship with Jesus Christ. This is what has been offered to you that you'd never have without the relationship with Jesus Christ.
I heard a preacher say one time, years and years ago, every person you meet is smarter than you in some area. And I thought, that's a magnificent way to look at human beings. Because, okay, I meet a black guy. I don't like him because he's black. I meet a lady who's poor and has got tattered clothes. That's the only thing she ever wears. I don't like her because she doesn't have nice clothes. I don't like somebody because they don't make enough money. They only make $100,000 a year. Well, that's not enough. I don't like. And if you put all those things together, it's really hard as human beings to throw those things out the window. That's what Jesus asks us to do.
Yeah.
James made it very clear when he said if somebody comes into your assembly and they got nice clothes on, and, they're rich, and you put them up front so everybody can see them, and then somebody else comes in where they're not dressed very nice, you try to hide him back in a lobby somewhere. And James was saying, that's not Christianity. That's not how God thinks. That's not how Jesus thinks. That's not how we're supposed to think.
And that's not the church.
That's not the church. So every once in a while, we have to go past that line. And I'm not saying that's easy, because some of us have grown up in environments where you didn't go past that line. I mean, you got rid of everybody that was different than you.
Well,
but that's not the way it is in the church.
No, and we're talking about just a little bit of history that we just recently talked about, the fact that there would have been questionnaires, and if you didn't meet criteria, you would not have been welcome. And
prejudice is so common in our society. So common. All of us, like if you walked in that door right now and I looked at you and I had never seen you before, I make some judgments about you. Like that.
It's inevitable.
Like that. I know whether you're male or female. Well, I'm kind of guessing. I know whether you're male or female. I know whether you're black or whether you're Caucasian. I know whether you have gray hair or don't have gray hair.
Young or old.
I know from your glasses that there's a little bit of a problem there. We make the judgments right away, and some of those judgments are just absolutely wrong. So that's why, and that goes back to, I wouldn't want anybody to do it to me.
No.
So why am I going to do it to them? I wouldn't want somebody coming in and say, well, he can't be a member of this church. He's bald-headed. Or at least the camera makes it look like I'm bald-headed.
Yeah. And for some reason, your camera takes the hair off the top. I don't know why that is.
Well, every man or woman that we meet is smarter than we are in some area.
In something.
And that should be thought about every individual that we meet.
That is a great, great line. I'll have to remember that one. Definitely have to remember that one. Do you have anything else you would like to add to this before we close it up this week?
The only thing that I would add about coming to the end of this series is we look at this fiasco and we look at this virus problem with those four things in mind.
Yeah.
That Jesus is the Messiah, that He offers us a place of safety and security and man right now in the world. If there's
That's right.
ever been a time when people wanted safety and security, it's now. And what teaches us that are the scriptures. That's why there's a book. And God invites us to come to his table, to his son's table, and honor his body and his blood by thinking about him every day and by making decisions based on him every day.
Yeah. Well, in the coming weeks, we will continue to discuss various things, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send them to me at mark.mitchell@parkavcoc.org. And if there is another topic you would like for us to talk about, that would be great too. But as I've shared with you, we will continue these every week until Steve and I get tired of doing these every week. So, I would invite you to make sure, I'm going to do a plug, this coming Sunday, Steve is actually going to be preaching from the pulpit, first time in over 2 years, and so we're excited, he's nervous, but I would invite you to come out and hear Steve speak. But most importantly, if you're looking for a church that's main function is a Messiah, a story, a place, and a table, come check us out at Park Avenue on the corner of Park and Main Street. And join us. Give us a shot. Let us offer some fellowship to you, some love to you, and let's just sit down and talk about Jesus for a little bit. If there's anything that we can do for you, please do not hesitate to give us a call. And until we meet again next week, have a blessed day. Thank you.